So let's get right to it because we have to talk about all the protests and violence that broke out in Louisville last night following yesterday's news about Breonna Taylor, which was very disappointing to many of us. 2 police officers were shot at the protests that broke out in the city. 1 suspect has been arrested and charged. The officers are expected to be okay. Erica, what did you make of some of the unrest last night? How are you doing today?
The unrest was expected. Energy is met with similar energy, and it's very tragic that we are erupting in violence. For me, I really took some time today, and I would really encourage people to do the same. I got up this morning and did yoga for an hour. I meditated for 15 minutes. I did cardio for a half hour, because the truth is, this isn't the time to lose it. It's the time to activate in a positive, constructive way. And we all need to be asking ourselves, if we want to be a part of the change, how do we meet this moment exactly where it is? And I understand it's completely frustrating and it's incredibly difficult for so many people, because we are being told that some of us, our humanity is not even a thing. We are not seen, we are not heard, we are not respected. And that's really hard to deal with. But the way that you meet that energy is by figuring out how you can be the most productive and making a better life for yourself and the people who look like you who are coming up behind you. So I'm just really trying to find some stillness, Sam.
Wow. Yeah, powerfully said, Erica. In fact, I was talking to you last night, just dumbfounded, as many people are, because there is so much confusion, so many unanswered questions in all of this. So, in fact, in order to gain some clarity and understand better, we're going to turn to former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Yodit Tewolde. Thank you so much for joining us here on DBL. We have so many questions, so let me just kick it off. So I'm just gonna start here. This is what's in my mind, what's in many of our viewers' minds. Why was just 1 police officer indicted? Why wasn't Breonna's name on the indictment? And in your opinion, was this homicide?
So no, I'm going to answer that last question first. I was not expecting murder charges. Now let me go back and say this. The grand jury's decision was the AG's decision. And I say that because a lot of people get confused by my statement. Prosecutors control the process of grand jury. It's a secretive process. It's a hearing that only involves prosecutors, the grand jurors, and a court reporter sworn to secrecy. No one else. So a jury hears 100% what a prosecutor puts before them. So with the grand jury process not being as transparent, and you have these outcomes happening repeatedly, you have to understand that there's going to be some distrust, especially with marginalized communities, Black and brown communities. Now, when we talk about why former officer Hankinson was charged and not the other 2, when they entered the apartment, Breonna's apartment, and there was a fire shot from Kenneth Walker, justifiably so. He didn't know who was coming into his apartment, so of course he had the right to protect his home and life. The officers, in their mind, received that as a threat. And according to Kentucky law, they were justified to meet that threat with lethal force. Now, Hankinson was charged with wanton endangerment of 3 individuals who were not in that apartment but were next door. And the question is then, okay, well, how can he be held responsible for almost killing 3 individuals and nothing be done about the individual who actually lost their life, Breonna Taylor? Well, the AG in the press conference yesterday stated that ballistics showed that there were no bullets that struck Breonna Taylor that actually came from Hankinson's gun. The fatal bullet came from one of the other 2 officers. I believe it was Cosgrove. And so that wasn't the fatal shot. Now, as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, I'm still wondering why Hankinson's behavior, his conduct, didn't show reckless disregard for human life for Breonna. Even if no bullet struck Breonna, because we have to be honest, no bullet struck the other 3 individuals either, but he's still being held responsible for them. Was this a homicide? No, it wasn't. Unfortunately, there was events that took place before this botched raid took place. The officer should have never been in Breonna's apartment to begin with. And they had absolutely nothing to do with How the warrant was even granted, that's another issue that's still being investigated. But as far as them taking orders and doing a raid per a warrant and returning fire with fire, unfortunately, that isn't murder. So the law is problematic. The standard of proof that we hold officers to is problematic. And that's why we keep seeing these same results.
Erica, did you have a question?
You know, I'm just really curious to get your opinion on this, because often we've heard from the AG and other leadership that they aren't going to be pushed or persuaded by public outcry and opinion. But do you feel like the grand jury we would have even gotten to this place if it weren't for public opinion and public outcry?
Absolutely not. Now, I do agree that there is no place for the court of public opinion. It can't affect what happens inside of a court of law. Of course, we have to be realistic, right? A potential jury pool is listening to the news every day. They're reading newspapers. Whatever the case may be, they're taking in news. So it's hard to shield yourself from something so high profile like this case. However, it is very important that we highlight. I don't even know if we'd even know Breonna Taylor's name if it weren't for activists, protests, and demands that were made to look at this case and look at everything that happened that transpired before this raid even occurred. So it's absolutely necessary, but it has no place in terms of, should this prosecutor overcharge? Should he bring unjust charges because there's angry people? Absolutely not. A charge shouldn't be brought if the facts and the evidence don't support it. However, it's necessary in actually acknowledging that something is happening, that there is a problem, and that we need to fix it.
So, Yodit, I just want us, listen, we're getting so many viewer comments in. I want us to have a conversation. Clearly, you are our expert, but again, we're all trying to understand it. Jeff, jump in. And I wish, COVID wasn't a thing so we could all sit around a table and really hash this out.
Yeah.
But please, Jeff.
Unfortunately, we're on live TV. Yodit, thank you so much for being here. I wish we did have more time. I love the way you put out all the facts on the table, which I think a lot of people aren't talking about. The outrage is justified, I believe, okay? Just from I don't want to get into all that. But my question to you, Yodit, is this. Do you think that the name Breonna Taylor, the movement, what her name represents right now, are outweighing what the actual facts of the case that you just stated earlier actually are?
Yes and no. I still believe that there were more charges that could have been brought against all three. I just don't think they should have been murder, okay? But her movement is not just representative of Breonna Taylor. Her movement, her name represents all the others that came before her. That is important, and we can't forget that.
Yeah, and listen, my mind is spinning right now. In fact, can we keep Yodit here until the next segment? Okay, so don't feel rushed when I ask you this question, Yodit, because we're going to keep you on. We're going to scrap what we have on coming up. Given everything that you've told us, is there a way, if new evidence is presented, that Breonna will finally seek some sort of justice? I mean, it's just mind-blowing to me that she was killed in her sleep in her own apartment, yet she has no justice. I understand all the facts. I get all that. But something just doesn't add up morally, ethically.
Well, there's still other investigations happening. There could be civil rights violations. So the Department of Justice is investigating. They could bring civil rights charges. Am I confident that that's going to happen? No, because we have William Barr in office, and so that's probably not going to happen. As far as new evidence being revealed, I think that we are done with the criminal portion of this case in terms of the other two officers. But of course, the prosecutor's obligated, if he gets new evidence, to look at the case again. Do I think that that's going to happen? No, because I think that his decision was made before he even presented a shred of evidence to the grand jurors.
Wow. Okay, so I'm sure Jeff has more questions. Erica, DBL Nation writing as well. We're going to keep Yodit here. Also, could it go federal? Because of that $12 million civil, does that showcase some sort of wrongdoing? So much to ask you. We will be right back with Yodit. She's going to stay right here. Do not go away. We are back with former prosecutor and criminal defense attorney Yodit Tewolde. Thank you so much, Yodit, for sticking around. Again, we have so many questions. Erica, I'm sure that you have a lot of follow-up questions. Have at it.
Yeah, and you kind of alluded to this earlier, that the prosecutor is basically responsible for how the grand jury, the information that they received. So one thing that Daniel Cameron did say was that there was a witness, which implied to me that there was one witness who corroborated a story that the officers announced themselves on this no-knock warrant. However, there were 12 witnesses, correct? So did they just choose to have one witness in the grand jury? Can we assume that?
I don't think we can assume anything with grand jury in terms of what was presented. Of course, we'll never know that. I did remember him saying that there was just one witness that testified to hearing and the officers announce themselves. And I was thinking to myself, well, what about the slew of others that said that they didn't hear? Were they given the opportunity to testify? We won't know that because, of course, he was able to hide behind the secrecy of these proceedings and say, I can't get into it.
Okay, I do want to read some comments from DBL Nation. Most of you are outraged and thanking you, Yodit, for the clarification, because it's hard to separate, again, just morality from the law. Deborah writes in, do you think that the celebs who are outraged are justified in their reactions to this after hearing your facts?
Oh, I absolutely think that everybody should be outraged. Just because the outcome wasn't what we wanted doesn't mean that it's right. Statutorily, it does not support charges. That is the problem. But this is nothing new. This isn't a new occurrence. This shouldn't come to any surprise to anybody. We are so tired of this happening over and over again that people think that we're being extreme when we're really not. We're over it. So absolutely justified, completely.
Thank you.
I mean, you look at me, but that was kind of my follow-up question, is about the celebrity outrage and just not enough people knowing the facts. And again, I support the outrage. I get where it's coming from. It's systemic, and it goes back way in the past that, again, we don't have time to talk about. You know, so I get where that is. But how come no one is presenting the facts like you are presenting them? There is another side to this story, and why aren't we looking who signed that warrant? Who actually signed that warrant? There is some things in the case that we cannot figure out. Even myself, and I've been digging through this case, trying to find out the facts for myself, because no one is presenting the facts, I feel like, on television, on the media. All you hear is the outrage.
I will say there are people who, like me, are trying to clarify things. I don't know how many times I could say that Breonna Taylor was not shot and killed in her bed. That just was not the case. This idea that the officers, no, they absolutely did not knock. No, Kenneth Walker, her boyfriend, stated as such. He said this is the reason why they got out of the bed in the first place, to go see who it was. Now, did they announce themselves? That is in question for me.
Right.
But people advocating for change can't go and say things that just aren't true. So it is up to all of us to, one, get the facts straight, but I do understand why the facts are distorted. We're so used to criminalizing Black people and saying that they are the ones that are responsible for their own deaths, that we almost have to like make them angelic. That, no, of course she was asleep, because anything else would mean that it was justified, right? So there's a reason, there's a reason behind why this happens repeatedly, but it's still nonetheless important to get the facts straight.
Yeah, we so appreciate you, Yodit. In fact, you know, Breonna Taylor died in her own hallway. 5 times she was shot. So, yeah, hopefully with your knowledge, with your clarification, it can garner that outrage to, as Erica said in the very top of the show, to evoke change, right?
Yeah.
And to create reform so we can prevent another Breonna Taylor situation, tragedy from happening again. Thank you again, Yodit, for answering all of our questions and helping us sort this out.